My paternal grandmother was born in Poland. She left Europe due to anti-Semitism. She left in 1926 when she was just a little girl. It was her parents' decision. She was alive during World War II, but in Canada, and had no brothers. My maternal grandfather also immigrated. Born in Vienna, Austria, he left in 1938 when the threat of Hitler invading Austria was imminent. He left on the Kindertransport, a British Red Cross humanitarian effort to get Jewish children out of Europe before it was too late. He arrived in England and was put in an internment camp. Then, he went to a foster home in Scotland. He fought for the British Army in World War II and spent a lot of time in the Far East. He worked in London for 5 years before leaving for Canada. He chose Canada because it was more like the Western European countries he was familiar with. My maternal grandmother was born in Toronto, Ontario. She was alive during World War II and remembers how much her own mother suffered when her sons were away in combat. She also remembers rations and never wanted to have sons herself in case there was another war. World War II changed society in Canada. It ended the economic depression that came before it. After the war, Canada entered a time of economic prosperity. Women worked outside the home during the war in factories, making airplanes, etc., because all of the men were in combat. They may have started the idea of careers outside the home in the minds of some women. Canada became a pro-democracy country. Non-democratic countries, i.e. fascism and communism, were enemies, and anyone supporting them in Canada was treated as an enemy. World War II also had a huge societal effect on the world. European Jewry was devastated by Hitler's campaign of genocide. An estimated 6 million were murdered. My parents are both baby boomers. They are the same age, just a few months apart. My mother was born in Toronto, Ontario, and my father was born in Hamilton, Ontario. They were alive during the Vietnam War, but they were children, and at the time they did not understand it or the politics of it. My parents had a very different lifestyle than I did when they were growing up as teens. For example, in technology, entertainment, and communication, they had black and white TV with few channels and radio, and also film cameras. The people at their school were mostly white and Christian. There were few immigrants and even few kids of immigrants. Women were much more likely to be full-time at home. There were lots of blatant sexism and double standards. As far as the sports girls played, girls didn't play soccer or do martial arts. There were only female-appropriate sports. The politics were mostly older white men. The social rules were stricter, with school dress codes and the way teens interact with teachers and parents, mealtime etiquette and manners. In pop culture, TV shows were very tame. There have been many major world events that have changed history over the course of my parents' life. They include the Martin Luther King speech and assassination of Martin Luther King happening in 1963 and 1968 respectively. Also, the Vietnam War, which occurred from 1965 to 1975. In 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first man to step foot on the moon. In 1976, Egypt and Israel signed a peace treaty. In 1980, the first AIDS case was recognized, and in 1985, Bob Geldof's Live Aid concert raised £30 million for African famine victims. The Berlin Wall separating the East and West Germany came down in 1989, and in 1990, Nelson Mandela, a black leader resisting apartheid in South Africa, was released from jail after 27 years. In 1994, multiracial elections were held in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. Also an important event was 1991 when the Soviet Union dissolved. There have also been many major world events that have changed history in my life. For example, in 2000, there was the Y2K fear of the end of the world, and in 2012, there is a fear that the world will once again maybe end. The 9/11 bombing in 2001 and 10 years later the killing of Osama bin Laden were both very important events for America and the world. Also important are the development of sites like YouTube, Facebook, MySpace, and Twitter in the 2000s, which has forever changed the way that we use the internet. Also important were the American recession starting in 2008 and the first African American president of the USA in 2009 with Barack Obama. Another issue that has happened over the course of my lifetime is global warming. Also, in 2010, there was the main earthquake in Haiti, which killed over 200,000 people. These historic events have shaped me in the way I live. For example, global warming is something that I have learned about in school, and now I am taking steps to be more green in my own life. The Haiti earthquake was something that I was really involved in, because I was very involved in fundraising efforts at my school. The technology and the development of sites like Facebook is something I've been very involved in, as I'm very active on a lot of those social networking sites. My life as a teen, right now, is very different from the type of life that my parents had. This is because of big changes in things like technology, sexism, and multiculturalism. For example, I live in a world with iPods, 3D TV, internet, cell phones, and digital cameras. I also live in a neighborhood that's multicultural and multi-religious with lots of people who have immigrated to Canada. Girls are playing lots of sports now, and there is a lot less sexism. Politics are multicultural, and both genders and more variety in age. As far as the social rules go, everything has sort of loosened up, and in pop culture, shows are dealing with more realistic themes, are more explicit, and more sex and violence is shown.